The Lord of the Rings are the three greatest movies ever made, but they could have been better. And I just want to rewrite one scene to talk about how these movies really could have been better. There are a lot of scenes that I could do this with, but I just want to do this with the one scene with Éowyn, where she says, "I am no man," just to make it slightly better. And I know what a lot of you are saying watching me do this, me included. I think that this is, again, one of the best scenes in all of Lord of the Rings. I often compare this with the Avengers moment, which is one of my least favorite moments in all of film, where all the female characters kind of band together and all these, women come and they just fight Thanos together. That was just kind of cringy to watch. But a scene that does this much better with the idea of, I guess, female empowerment is the Éowyn scene. And it's really well done in the movies. She says, "I am no man," and then just demolishes the Witch King into nothing. But while I love that scene, walk with me while I rewrite it. Now, some of you already know where I'm going with this, but this video is primarily for fans of the movie. Okay, so let's talk about this. In order to make this scene better, let's rewind right to the moment before Éowyn picks up Merry. So, erase everything from your memory. Merry just gets discarded by Théoden, where the king tells him that no one can bear him as a burden for the long ride to Minas Tirith. Now, my one rewrite for this scene is that when Éowyn picks up Merry, that he doesn't know who it is, and he doesn't know that Éowyn is the one who's picking him up. He thinks it's just another man who is in battle with him, who's riding out to find glory and honor. I actually think this scene would work better if Merry actually rode to the camp with the rest of the group and then just sees this other character, someone that he thinks looks familiar, but someone who has maybe the look of death in their eyes. Merry rides on the same horse as this mysterious character that just got introduced but is wearing a helmet. This character is wearing a helmet for keeping their identity a secret. For, just the sake of picking a name for this character, let's pick a name that in Rohan means secret helmet. So I'm just going to throw it together. This person's name, I don't know, is Durnhelm. Random name. I kind of just plucked that out of nowhere. Now, Merry thinks that Durnhelm's character is strange, but is just very excited to ride into war with the hope of helping his friends, that he really doesn't ever think too much about why this character is strange to him. And Durnhelm doesn't remove their helmet, ever. Now, fast forward a bit to the point where they finally get to the battle, and Théoden goes on a bit of a rampage here, but then gets taken down by the Witch King in the middle of the battle. And the beast that the Witch King is on grabs him, slings him around, and then all of a sudden the Witch King commands his beast to feast on his flesh. The beast moves forward, and Merry is watching nearby in horror, completely helpless to do anything. But all of a sudden, Merry sees someone rushing in front of Théoden. It's Durnhelm. And everything here is from Merry's perspective too. Then all of a sudden, this Durnhelm character starts speaking to the Witch King. And it's getting very strange for Merry. He's seeing something and he's going, "This is familiar, but I don't know." And Merry, desperate to help, starts to crawl over to where this discussion is taking place. Now, all the same dialogue that's happening in the movies can happen in this scene too. But in this character, they're still just somewhat anonymous at this point. But viewers right now are just starting to figure out who this might be. Now, Merry finally gets to the duel right as the Witch King says, "No living man may hinder me." And as Merry hears this, he thinks, "Heck, I'm a hobbit, not a man." And he takes his blade and stabs the Witch King behind the knee. He is in pain and wreathes away, but still he looks up last second at Durnhelm, who takes off his helmet to reveal both to Merry and the audience a mane of golden hair blowing in the wind. It was Éowyn. She says, "I am no man," and stabs the Witch King right in the face, thus defeating this thing forever. It's a small rewrite, and it's totally plagiarized from the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. Because in the book, this is how this scene is written. Are you kidding me? Now, I get all of what all of you might be thinking and saying right now, that there's no way a visual medium could hide the face of Éowyn. We'd all recognize her too quickly. I think that's a garbage point. I think they could find a way to fix this, because in the book, I still saw the movie, and I still knew that this Durnhelm character who is in the book had to be Éowyn, but I wasn't positive. And even though I kind of knew, That moment when she takes off her helmet in the book and slays the Witch King was some of the most hyped I've ever been while reading a book. It was just so cool and so perfectly written. It is just such a fun scene too. And I think if you hadn't seen the movies, this scene in the books would have just been astounding to read for the first time. Astounding. And this really got me thinking this week as I read that. What are screenwriters thinking? Look, I'm all about the idea that visual and written mediums are totally different games. And they totally have different rules, but you cannot tell me that they couldn't have just made this scene according to the books. I think they could have. And I think it would have made this scene amazing. Amazing in the movies. Because it really is just an amazing scene. Like, even as is in the movies, it's a great scene. But it would have made this amazing scene even better. Just follow the original. It's a sentiment that I think is true of a lot of screenwriters that I get frustrated at. I think we've passed by the era where screenwriters really need to stop thinking about CGI or practical effects and how those things might not be able to cover the book versus movie differences. Because CGI and practical effects these days are absolutely able to do anything that they need to make a book into a movie. I think one of my least favorite changes of book to movie comes in the Harry Potter series. Totally different thing. But when Harry stands underneath the platform as Draco and Snape just kill and interrogate Dumbledore, book Harry would never do that. In the book, Draco disarms Dumbledore because Dumbledore knows who Harry is and knows Harry would come to fight for him. So he immobilizes Harry, and Draco's able to get that split-second advantage and then disarm Dumbledore. And so Harry has to watch from below deck, not just sitting and watching, but he's unable to move. And it's only when Dumbledore dies that the spell is broken and Harry can run free. Now, this is a terrible choice for screenwriters to make, because in the movies, Harry watched Dumbledore die without doing anything, without doing a single thing. And I think he would never do that in the book. It's frustrating to me. I think the same is actually kind of true of Eowyn. It's a small change, but she's kind of excited to get into battle in the movies, even though she looks a bit scared and nervous. In the book, Eowyn, or Durnhelm, is described as a young man, Merry thought, as he returned the glance, less in height and girth than most. He caught the glint of clear gray in his eyes, and then he shivered, for it came suddenly to him that it was the face of one without hope who goes in search of death. Eowyn is marching to battle, almost hardened and ready for death. It's a different depiction than the movies really make. And I sometimes just wish screenwriters would stop trying to make a movie their own. Because let's be honest, what movie adaptation has ever been better than a book? The only one that I would say is comparable, and I'd still actually say the book is better than the movie, but the movie was a marvel, is the movie Silence by Shisako Endo and then Martin Scorsese, who was the director of that movie. Now, a lot of people might prefer a movie to a book, but the writing is almost universally better in books than they are in movies because writers are writing for a reason. They're writers for a reason. They know how to write a good scene. And here we are thinking that we'll be able to make good changes to certain things that happen in movies because we're better writers than the movie or than the book writers are. Granted, I still think Lord of the Rings and the movies are the greatest movies ever made, and they are a marvel, and I will die on that hill, and I think I will always die on that hill. I love them with everything in me. I think they are just so dang good. But weirdly, while they are the greatest movies ever made, they could have been made better. And Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, I think you are great writers, but I'm looking at you here. You wrote some amazing scenes. Like, I still think about that Gollum debate scene. I think that's one of the best in all of cinema. And you even wrote an amazing scene here with Eowyn defeating the Witch King. But you could have made it better. You just needed to follow the books. You needed to trust J.R.R. Tolkien, what many consider the greatest writer of the last 500 years in the English language. And you needed to trust that he knew what he was doing. And with all that said and done, I just want to read this scene because I want you to listen to how Tolkien writes this scene and how perfect it is. I will continually never get over how good of a writer this man is, especially with this reveal here. It's just so victorious. So listen to this scene. Then out of the blackness in his mind, he thought that he heard Dernhelm speaking. Yet now the voice seemed strange, recalling some other voice that he had known. Begone, foul Durmrlake, Lord of Carrion. Leave the dead in peace. A cold voice answered, Come not between the Nazgul and his prey, or he will not slay thee in thy turn. He will bear thee away to the house of lamentation, beyond all darkness, where thy flesh shall be devoured, and thy shriveled mind be left naked to the lidless eye. A sword rang as it was drawn. Do what you will, but I will hinder it if I may. Hinder me? Thou fool, no living man may hinder me. Then Mary heard of all sounds in that hour the strangest. It seemed that Dernhelm laughed, and the clear voice was like the ring of steel. But no living man am I. You look upon a woman. Eowyn I am, Eamon's daughter. You stand between me and my lord and kin. Begone, if you be not deathless. For living or dark undead, I will smite you if you touch him. The winged creature screamed at her, but the ringwraith made no answer and was silent, as if in sudden doubt. Very amazement for a moment conquered Mary's fear. He opened his eyes, and the blackness was lifted from them. There, some paces from him, sat the great beast, and all seemed dark about it. And about it loomed the Nazgul lord like a shadow of despair. A little to the left, facing them, stood she whom he called Dernhelm. But the helm of secrecy had fallen from her, and her bright hair, released from its bonds, gleamed with pale gold upon her shoulders. Her eyes, gray as the sea, were hard and fell, and yet tears were on her cheeks. A sword was in her hand, and she raised her shield against the horror of her enemy's eyes. Eowyn it was, and Dernhelm also, for into Mary's mind flashed the memory of the face that he saw at the riding from Dunharrow. The face of one that goes seeking death, having no hope. Pity filled his heart, and great wonder. And suddenly the slow-kindled courage of his race awoke. He clenched his hand. She should not die so fair, so desperate. At least she should not die alone, unaided. The face of their enemy was not turned toward him, but still he hardly dared to move, dreading lest the deadly's eyes should fall on him. Slowly, slowly he began to crawl aside, but the black captain, in doubt and malice, intent upon the woman before him, heeded him no more than a worm in the mud. Suddenly the great beast beat its hideous wings, and the wind of them was foul. Again it leaped into the air, and then swiftly fell down upon Eowyn, shrieking, striking with beak and claw. Still she did not blench. Maiden of the Rohirrim, child of kings, slender but a steel blade, fair yet terrible. A swift stroke she dealt, skilled and deadly. The outstretched neck she clove asunder, and the hewn head fell like a stone. Backward she sprang as the huge shape crashed to ruin. Vast wings outspread, crumpled on the earth, and with its fall, the shadow passed away. A light fell about her, and her hair shone in the sunrise. Out of the wreck rose the black rider, tall and threatening, towering above her. With a cry of hatred that stung the very ears like venom, he let fall his mace. Her shield was shivered in many pieces, and her arm was broken. She stumbled to her knees. He bent over her like a cloud, and his eyes glittered. He raised his mace to kill, but suddenly he too stumbled forward with a cry of bitter pain, and his stroke went wide, driving into the ground. Mary's sword had stabbed him from behind, shearing through the black mantle, and passing up beneath the hauberk had pierced the sinew behind his mighty knee. "Eowyn, Eowyn!" cried Mary. Then tottering, struggling up with her last strength, she drove her sword between crown and mantle, as the great shoulders bowed before her. The sword broke, sparkling into many shards. The crown rolled away with a clang. Eowyn fell forward upon her fallen foe. But lo, the mantle and hauberk were empty. Shapeless they lay now on the ground, torn and tumbled, and a cry went up into the shuddering air, and faded to a shrill wailing, passing with the wind. A voiceless body, and thin that died, and was swallowed up, and was never heard again in that age of this world. This is just such a perfectly written scene. And I know J.R.R. Tolkien was a perfectionist and he wanted to delete certain scenes that he wrote and he wanted to rewrite some, but everything that he wrote is just perfect. And I cannot get over how good of writing this is. And it just annoys me sometimes. And again, I love the movie so much, but it sometimes just annoys me that these screenwriters think they could write better scenes than some of the greatest writers ever living. And it just wanted to get that off my chest. I still love the movies. I still think the movies are some of the greatest things ever made. But just trust writers sometimes. Trust that a writer knows what he's doing. But that's all I got for you today. Hopefully you enjoyed the essay and enjoyed this incredible scene. Make sure you subscribe, like the video if you made it this far. You can become a member for some members only content and early access to videos. And as always, remember to look toward Numenor that was, and beyond to Elvenhome that is, and to that which is beyond Elvenhome and will ever be. I'll see you in the next one.